Happy Easter, everyone. It's good to see you on this rainy but beautiful Easter Sunday morning. We made it through the desert of Lent. We've walked through the darkness of Good Friday, the uncertainty of Holy Saturday, and now we're here. The church is filled with beautiful symbols of new life. The music is celebratory, and there is a sense of hope and joy among us. There's a famous photo of an Easter celebration in Jerusalem where the crowd is much like you are. They're standing in this image, shoulder to shoulder. Light is streaming into the sanctuary from the sun outside, and it's so intense that the inside of the church looks like it's on fire. I love that image. It suggests that Easter isn't just a nice Sunday, that it's really a burning flame that's meant to clear out the dead wood in our lives and set the world ablaze with God's love. A love that death cannot put out. So welcome to Easter. For a moment, I want us to think about what has brought us here. Maybe you've come with a parent or a friend who invited you. Maybe you're here because it's a family tradition and you always gather on Easter. Maybe you're here because you hope that your kids or grandkids will see something of the faith that brings you to this place. Or maybe, and I expect this is true for some of us, maybe we're here hoping for something. Looking for a reason to believe that the world isn't as broken as the news would suggest. So I want you to know that whatever your why is, whatever brought you, I'm glad you're in this place. It is good that we are together, and I believe it pleases God that we gather on the day of Christ's resurrection. So for the next few moments, I want us to move past some of the kind of holiday stuff related to Easter and look at the holy, much-needed disruption that Easter brings. Because if Easter is just a brunch-adjacent religious ritual, then it's not really worth our time. But if it's true, it changes everything. I've shared with you before this. I love this image. If you knew N.T. Wright, you would understand why this is so wild, because he's kind of this very staid, brilliant English Anglican priest, bishop, and theologian. He recalls an experience of getting into a taxi in London, and the taxi driver recognizes him, looks at him through the rearview mirror and says, "Good morning, Bishop." And he could tell that Bishop Wright is off. He's in a hurry to some conference or event or service, and they were stuck in traffic. And he says to him, "Well, just, I hope you have a good day. I'm going to get you to wherever you're going as quick as possible." And the way I look at it is if Jesus is raised from the dead, everything else is rock and roll. What a great way to live. None of the rest of it matters. If Jesus is raised, it changes everything. Living in this part of the world, we have a bit of a challenge with Easter because it happens during spring. We look outside and we see the blooms and the blossoms and the greening grass and the inevitable coating of yellow pollen on everything, and it's easy to conflate the resurrection with the mere change of seasons. Nature's waking up. Life returns. Isn't it poetic? But let me ask you, would you bet your life on flowering trees? Would you center your entire existence on the fact that green grass will return in the springtime? Probably not. And I bet that's not why you're here. The first disciples, a group of terrified, demoralized, struggling friends of Jesus, didn't turn the Roman Empire upside down because they witnessed the seasonal change in nature. They didn't move from paralyzing fear to willing to die for their faith because the weather got warmer. And the women who went to the tomb weren't looking for springtime renewal. They were carrying burial spices. They were going to perform the final grim task of honoring a dead friend. They weren't expecting a metaphor. They were expecting a body. When you lose someone you love, you don't go to the cemetery thinking the plot's going to be empty, that because spring is in the air. You go because death feels final. The miracle of Easter isn't that life is cyclical like the seasons of the year. It's that God has broken the cycle. Death is overcome. Easter is the claim that when humanity did its absolute worst to the one who was God's love in the flesh, that God was busy doing God's best. Easter is God saying, my yes is louder than the empire's no. That's the power of Easter. When we think all is lost, God comes back. Friends, the world has changed a lot over these past several years. It feels unsettled and fragile, and broken in many ways. We've been through a global pandemic, watched political polarization turn family members and neighbors into enemies, and we're all probably a little more tired by all of it than we used to be. Our tombs look a little different, but Easter speaks to all of that. Pope Francis once observed, in front of the big why of life, we have two paths. We can stay and watch gloomily the tombs of yesterday and of today, or we can bring Jesus to our tombs. Because each one of us, he says, make no mistake about it, each one of us does have some small tomb, some area of life that is a little bit dead. A wound, an injury suffered, a bitterness that doesn't let up, a remorse that returns over and over, a sin that we can't get past. And we identify these today, he says, our little tombs we have inside. And Easter means that we can bring Jesus there. Maybe it's an illness and the uncertainty that can bring. Maybe it's an addiction to the digital hum of your phone, a constant need for stimulation or validation that leaves you feeling empty. Maybe it's career burnout. It's made you feel like you're just holding on, going through the motions. A relationship that's grown cold, a bitterness towards someone that you just can't seem to shake. A sense that the world has come undone and there's nothing you can do about it. Or maybe it's just a quiet, nagging anxiety that you're not enough. You're not measuring up. When the stone is rolled in place and you can't see a way out, we're not comforted by the possibility of springtime. No, we feel like the women who came to the tomb, hopeless, maybe paralyzed a bit, and wonder if we can go on. Can life be full again? In those moments, we need more than warmer weather. We need someone to once and for all conquer the enemies that plague us. We need God to do for us that which we can't do for ourselves. We need resurrection, new life. When life comes at us in these ways, we don't need sentimentality. We don't need a top 10 tips for a better you. We need someone to shout into the little tombs of our lives and say, come out into the light. Easter is the announcement that the worst thing is never the last thing. That, as Tolkien said, one day everything sad will become untrue. Easter is the promise that God specializes in bringing things back from the dead, our hope, our purpose, and our capacity to love. We often talk about Easter as a victory, which is accurate, but we need to be careful with that word because in our culture, victories are often transactional. It usually means someone else lost. It means a scoreboard, a trophy, someone walking away in tears. But Christ's victory is different. Christ is victorious over sin and death and fear and hate, the forces that keep us enslaved to our worst impulses. He's mocked and beaten and ultimately murdered on a cross. The disciples scatter. Sin and death and fear and hate seem to have won, and the movement of love is stopped. But then Sunday, Easter, God comes back, and death loses its grip, and love wins. And friends, this isn't just a resuscitation. It's not like a medical drama where the heart monitor starts beeping again and everything goes back to normal. It's resurrection, a completely new quality of life. So when we say Christ is victor, we mean that the powers of this world, the powers of sin and fear and death and hate, the Good Friday powers that Rome thought had won, Easter means they no longer have the final say. It means that we don't have to align ourselves with those forces that say, well, that's just the way things are. Easter means we know a better story and a much greater ending, which in fact becomes a beginning. We can be generous, we can be peacemakers, we can forgive, we can love, because we know the one who is life and who has conquered death. Easter is God's resounding yes to the way Jesus lived, which means that following the risen Christ isn't about checking a box on a Sunday morning. It's about practicing resurrection life. It's about looking at the tombs in our world and our community, loneliness and poverty and injustice and prejudice and violence and bigotry and hate, and refusing to believe that that's just how the world is or how things will always be. Because in the resurrection, God has said no to all of those and yes to Jesus, which means we can then face those Good Friday forces with the audacious courage to say, this suffering, this injustice, this brokenness, this loss isn't the end. I don't know what drew you here today. Maybe it was the music. That's one of the reasons I come. You don't have to pay me for that. I just show up. Maybe it was family. Maybe it's just a weird hunch that there has to be something more. You know, the women at the tomb weren't really sure why they were there, except they were drawn to be near Jesus, even when they thought he was gone. And what they found turned their world upside down. Easter isn't just a nice story we gather and remember once a year. It's not a spring festival. It's the announcement that love wins. It's the gospel truth that the stone has been rolled away, not only that Jesus might walk out, but that we can see in and realize that we're free. It's a message of hope for a weary world. Don't be afraid. If you're looking for Jesus, if you're looking for God's love, the one who was crucified, he's not confined by death. He's alive and going ahead of you. So take heart. Going to all the places you already live, he'll be there. Take heart. You are loved, and life is only beginning. Amen.